Good day, everybody, and welcome to this week's Genealogy Happy Hour. How's everybody today? So today we're going to be talking about Scotland, all things Scottish, and Scottish ancestry. And just a reminder, at the end of the near the end of the broadcast, we'll be having our Happy Hour live Q&A, and since it is the Happy Hour, today I'm going to enjoy a local beer. This is a blueberry ale from Gaha House. It's not what I usually drink, but I actually really do enjoy it, especially this time of year. Good little trick too, if you ever have it and you don't have it cold, and you can do this with a regular beer if you want. If you have frozen blueberries, they make a great way to chill your beer. You wouldn't want to put an ice cube in because it's just gonna get all watery. Nobody likes watery beer. Okay, so we're going to talk things Scottish. First thing you notice, I'm wearing my my bow tie. One of my tartan bow ties. This one particular is for Anderson tartan. Andersons are my mother's father's family. They originated from Scotland on the actual Anderson side. They came over in the late 1700s, and they came originally to, it was called Calbay, from Port Moray and Cape Breton. My grandfather's family wound up in Donkin, and his family were coal miners. So everybody that's a little bit about my family. So what we're going to do is now sort of talk more general things in regards to all things Scottish. I'm going to just bring up here for a second a timeline of Scottish activities or things that led to Scottish immigration in Canada, because it's a good place to start from when you're looking, if you have Scottish ancestors, to get an idea when they might came here if you're not sure, and also possibly what the circumstances were. So I'm going to share that now. Just 1 minute while I get that done. So as you can see, this here is it's a timeline I made, and it's going to give you some things. We're going to start way back here. Basically, where it starts with Scotland's relationship to Canada and Scottish ancestry, we'll start back at 1621. That's when James I actually established the New Scotland colony. At that point, it included what we call Nova Scotia today, New Brunswick, Prince Edward Island, and the Gaspé area of Quebec. So basically around the Gulf of St. Lawrence. So shortly thereafter, there was some Scottish settlements began in Cape Breton and along the Bay of Fundy. And that would basically start in 1622. They were just small settlements at first, but they in 1632, they actually wound up having the Scots surrendered their claims to France. So things went on. If you know North American history, particularly Canadian, they went on for numerous years where there was a lot of tension between the French and the British. Next major group of Scots that came were in 1720. The Hudson Bay Company actually started recruiting a lot of Scots from Orkney to wind up working for them, work as trappers, as hunters. Um, Something I really found that's really kind of neat. I'm going to show you near the end. This is one of the resources. The University of Manitoba actually has a resource that has a lot of information on people that worked for the Hudson Bay Company over the years. In this, if you have Scottish ancestry that might have come in that period or later, and you know that they were part of that group, you can find out a lot of information on them. As I said, I'll show you in a bit. So we go on from there, and so we're up now to 1750, and this is when the clearances began, specifically the Highland Clearances, and then at 1760 we have the Lowland Clearances. There was a little bit of before, but this is sort of when the official timeline when people say they occurred. So what happened around the same time? We had the fall of Fortress of Louisbourg, and 1758 and 1759 we had the fall of Quebec. And in 1763 we have the we have the conquest of Louisbourg and the fall of Quebec, and shortly thereafter, I think in 1763, we had the surrender of the French territory in North America to the British Crown. So next major event, you have the Highland Clearances, like I said, the Lowland Clearances, and then you start getting Scottish settlement. This was mainly from the Highlands. This went on from 1770 and to 1815. I'm specifically as a result from the clearances. At 1783, you got the Scottish loyalists started to arrive in Upper Canada and Nova Scotia as a result of the American Revolution. In 1793, you have the landing of the Hector in Pictou. This is a major event in Scottish history in Nova Scotia. It was it helped to establish some of the first communities in the Pictou area, and also a lot of those people that wound up from the Hector or even thereafter that landed in Pictou would move on to Cape Breton and start some of the later Scottish settlements as opposed to the really early ones in the Cape Breton area. Ever been to Cape Breton? It would be very familiar looking terrain to the Highland people, so it was a place they really felt at home. So in 1802, we had the Selkirk settlements in Prince Edward Island. Those were mainly around the Bangor area, which is up east in the eastern end of the island. And then you had Selkirk settlements in 1812 in the Red River in Manitoba. This would be later the basis for the city of Winnipeg, the province of Manitoba. Was really started at this point. You still have the Highland Clearances and Lowland Clearances going on. In 1815, they had a population, they estimate the Scottish population in Canada was 15,000. This would be from the early settlements, the settlers from the clearances, as well as the Hudson Bay Company workers. Other thing I did mention when I was talking about the fall of Louisbourg and Quebec City, a lot of British soldiers that were Scottish wound up staying in Canada. Specifically, there was a lot in Montreal. Really, the Scots were a big foundation of a lot of Canadian culture and Canada as we know today. So when we go on from there, we are looking, like I said, we have the Scottish settlements. You have the population of 15,000 in 1815. We have 15,000 as the estimate of Scottish people living in Canada. So what happened after 1815? Like I said, this was the major point when you got the settlers from the Highlands. You started getting also settlers after there, more of a mix from the Highland and the Lowlands. What happened with a lot of the Lowland Scots? They first they really came here, where the Highland Clearances were a lot about agriculture, and the people were coming here to reestablish their agricultural lifestyle. The Lowland Scots, a lot of them had already been in the early clearances had been pushed into more industrial roles in industrial jobs, and that's why a lot of them came, like my grandfather's I was mentioning at the top of the live cast, to work in the coal mines. They had come from a mining background in Scotland, in the Lowlands, particularly around Edinburgh, Lothian, a few other places. So at that point in 1815, it started to shift, that it wasn't just as much of the Highlanders that were coming to have an agricultural farming, continue their agricultural farming lifestyle. You started getting more industrial Scots from the Lowlands. A lot of these ones also wound up coming to Quebec and Ontario. Again, they were more urbanized, more looking for to work in industry, whether that be coal mining or manufacturing. So it was a different type of immigrant that was from Scotland that was starting to come at that point. So Canada progressed along with lots of Scots still coming. And so we're going to go to 1867. I don't have it here marked on timeline, but this is very important. This is the founding of Canada. Canada's first prime minister was a Scot, Sir John A. Macdonald, which who I have here. This is Sir John A. I actually have a video on Sir John A. I'll put in the description so you can catch at the end. When you watch this on replay, you'll be able to see this. But Sir John A. was from Scotland. He was specifically from Glasgow. In 1873, our second Prime Minister, Alexander Mackenzie, was also a Scot. He was born in Perthshire, Scotland originally. So really the Scots were important in the early history of us as a nation, getting to the point of nationhood, and even at the beginning of us as a country distinct and dominion distinct from being just a British colony or a set of British provinces. It's good stuff. If you're in PEI, drop by the Gahan House. They don't pay me to say this, or you can get it at our liquor stores. In fact, I think you can get this throughout Atlantic Canada, the Blueberry Ale. So the people watching today, do we have Scottish? Do we have Scots in the audience? You have questions? Do you know where your Scottish ancestry came from in Canada? So going past 1867, Scots continued to enter Canada. In fact, it was estimated that at Confederation we had, one second here, at 1871, so the first census after Confederation, so 151 years ago, there was 500,000 Scots. So remember, in 1812, we had 15,000. So it went from 15,000 to 500,000 in just over 56 years. In 56 years. So you can see this as Scottish immigration continued. There was quite an influx of Scots, and again, Scots tend to have a lot of them had large families. So we continued on, and actually Scottish immigration continued through the early 20th century, all the way up. Really, post-war, there was a program of it was called the Empire Settlement Act. Actually, after the First World War, which gave a lot of Scots passage to come to Canada. Right in here, when we're looking back here in 1905, that would be the year my last Scottish ancestor, Elizabeth Baxter, and her parents, so my great-grandmother, arrived in Canada. She was my last non-Canadian ancestor that I have, or of non-Canadian birth. So they continued to arrive in post-World War I and post-World War II. World War I, there was a even before that, there was still strong encouragement of Scottish Presbyterians, Scottish farmers to come to Canada. A lot of them wound up out west, where it was still growing, and there was a lot of farmland still available. So the Scottish population by the 1931 census had doubled again. So from 1871, so in 60 years, it had doubled to, they estimated, over 1 million Scots, or people that would consider themselves of Scottish ancestry. Interesting enough, my other great-grandmother, who was alive until 1980, she was born in the 1800s. She had listed in earlier censuses that her native language was still Gaelic. And if you go to Cape Breton, you will see that there's a lot of communities that they now have put up the signs in Gaelic to try to revive the language and the culture. There's a Gaelic college there. The Scottish immigration, Scottish heritage is really important to the history of Cape Breton, to the history of Nova Scotia. After all, Nova Scotia does mean New Scotland. And even post-World War II, they continue to settle until 1993. There was over 4 million. In fact, in the last census of 2016, and there was 4.79 million people that were in Canada that stated they were of Scottish heritage. It's roughly 14% of Canadians. So that's something that's really part of our heritage. And by sort of having an understanding of this timeline, again, it's just to tell you how much influence the Scots have, and if you have Scottish family, sort of where you can picture why they might have come to Canada. So let's just talk a little bit more about your Scottish ancestry. So with the Scottish ancestry, one of the things people sometimes have difficulty with is, in any research, is going and finding, when you're looking for your ancestry, to sort of know who might be from who. Luckily, with the Scots, they did some things to try to make it easy for us. One of the things they did is they had a common way of naming. It's a naming convention that they would use. and it's actually kind of simple in a way, and there's a pattern that's easily to follow. So we're going to talk about this because this will give you a good idea of being able to figure out grandparents' names of different generations if you're looking, especially since there's a lot of common names. So you might know that your great grandfather was a John McDonald, but you might not know his wife's name when you're looking in records, you're trying to find it. This might help give you an idea by looking at his children and his grandchildren, see how they're named. So let's go with this. And so how it works is we'll start with the male progeny first, and their actual naming conventions go until they sort of have up to the 14th son and the 14th daughter, which would be quite large families. But like I said, it's sort of a pattern you'll be able to follow. So the first son is named after the paternal grandfather. You'd be able to tell where, who the father's grandfather was, or the child's father's father was, by looking and seeing they should share a name. The second son would be likewise named after their maternal grandfather. The third son would be named after the father. So in my case, if I was naming my children, my father's name is Vernon, and not very Scottish. He's not on the Scottish side of my family, and my father-in-law's name would be is Don. So if we had a son and we were to name him using this convention, our first son would be named Vern. The second son would be named Donald. The third son would be named Brian after me. The fourth son. Now the fourth son is named after the father's father's father. So it's the paternal grandfather on the father's side. And likewise, the fifth son is named after the mother's father's father. The sixth son is named after the father's mother's father. And the 7th through 10th son are named after the fathers. They have 4 great grandfathers. So that's where, on the father's side, he has 4 great grandparents. We all have 4 great grandparents. So that's where the 7th through 10th sons would be named. Likewise, the 11th to 14th sons would be named after the mother's 4 great grandfathers. It's very similar on the daughter side. So you have your first daughter named after, but in this case, the maternal grandmother. So you'll see when you're talking about the female side, you go with the female ancestry sort of first. The second daughter would be named after the paternal grandmother. The third daughter would be named after her mother. Now, the fourth daughter would be named after, this goes a little different here, but the father's father's mother. And the fifth daughter would be named after the mother's mother's mother. The sixth daughter would be named after the father's mother's mother. So, and the 7th to 10th daughters are named after the mother's 4 great grandmothers, and the 11th to 14th daughter are named after the father's 4 great grandmothers. You'll notice, though, and I've seen this in my own family tree, and I've seen it in others I've been researching, that if a child dies, you'll notice that you might have another child that assumes that same name. So I know I have, going back a few generations, on my grandfather's mother's side, it was Baxter. When I go back to Scotland, I see there was a couple generations where you had 2 children with the same name. It's not an error. What happened was, to try to keep that family name going, they would name the next child of that gender the same. If the child died in childhood and did not have a chance to continue their own family. So in this case, I believe in a couple of them they were one of them was a Robert, so there was two Roberts in the same family, and there was also, I believe, two Williams in the same family in a different generation. Again, that was just to try to keep that name within the family so it would continue to carry on. Also, in the naming pattern, it could be very common that you have two children in the same family. So if I had a large family, you might wind up, if you're following the naming conventions, for instance, if my father's name was Robert, but the mother's father's father was named Robert as well, you can't have two Roberts as sons that are living at the same time. So they would actually have a double name. So you might have Robert John. The second one might have a second name when they're, or be John Robert when they are baptized. Again, just to carry on and recognize that name from both sides of the families. And that second name would be given while they're being Christians. So that's sort of the naming patterns, and why that's important to understand is because you can go back, like I said, and look at your family and be able to kind of trace back. If they followed this convention, it will help you be able to figure out who belongs to who. And like I said, you can have a pattern when you're looking at the name. So if you're unsure of the spouse's names, when you're looking of a grandfather, great grandfather, you can sort of trace it down and you can see where those might be, especially when they have those larger families, so you get it repeated. So that, and it also gives you an idea of the position of an ancestor if you know their father's name and you know their name, and you can go back a couple generations. You can see if they were named after you could tell if they were the first, second, third, fourth son, fifth son, or daughter. You could sort of determine that, which might help you find and know also their siblings. Again, it doesn't always hold true, but it was very common, really, even into Canada for Scottish families until the mid 20th century, especially when you had Scottish people marrying Scottish people. That they would continue that tradition a lot of times. One of the other things that's really important when you're looking up your Scottish ancestors is, and you're looking for the records, remember they use a lot of nicknames, and a lot of ones that, what I mean, like, we have not just Robert is Bob, like we might have here, but you would have different versions of Alexander. You would have Xander, you'd have Sandy, you would have Alexander. You'd have, for Angus, you'd have Gussie. For Charles or Charlotte, you'd have Charlie, which would be a both male and female name. You would have different ones. So often, depending which records you're looking at, they might be listed in one as opposed to the other. And some of them are just really, and they're not ones you would think of. So get yourself familiar with that. There's a lot of good websites that will give you that Scottish information where you can find sort of Scottish names and nicknames for them. One of the other type of common things is you also see feminizations of masculine names, such as Murdoch. You might find people in the family named Murdina. Again, they would add the Ina to male names to make them feminine, which is it's a common thing within the Scottish naming protocols. So, is there any questions from there? Anybody watching? Just type your questions in there in the chat, and I'll be glad to get and try to answer them as well. Like I said, we'll be having sort of a question and answer session at the end here. And that question and answer can be on Scottish genealogy or any aspect of genealogy. If you have a question you want to ask me, something you're looking into. So you'll see across the bottom there, I put a message. If you could take a moment to fill out the survey that I have, it's in the description. This is for me to try to determine what type of guests, what type of topics you'd like to have me have on future genealogy happy hours. Okay. So going from there, I'm going to just talk to you a little bit about some of my favorite genealogy websites or resources that I use. Now, one that is, I think, really, I sort of use two in conjunction. I use Family Search or Ancestry or My Heritage. I'm searching records. And because I use it with this website called Scotland's People. Scotland's People is the official record of the national their national record service of Scotland. It's basically their actual full records. Doesn't have a subscription service. How it works is you buy credits. A couple things you can do: buy credits if you're looking at when the dollar is competitive against the British pound, just to get your best bang for the buck. You can buy them in blocks. Usually, I believe 30 credits is £7.50. Most records are about, at least the records that I get are six. They take 6 credits for most records, and so you're looking at about $1.30. But the thing is, Scottish records are really, really good, particularly their civil registration records. If you get into that, they'll list all kinds of things. They'll have your both parents' names on. They'll have on a marriage record. They'll have the parents' names of both the groom and the bride. You'll have their occupations, have their addresses, their actual physical addresses in a lot of these records as well. They have pretty good detail, some of the best details as far as records that go. So I'm just going to give you an example here. I have some saved things that I know. I was looking up my Baxter's relatives. So if I was wanting to find, and again, this is really why it's good to use the Family Search or one of those other resources database. They don't give you the full record. You don't get to see it, but you can narrow it down. So if I'm going to sort of show you an advanced search here, this is one I know that we'll find. So I'm going to look in church records, and I want to look in banns and marriages. So I have with here you have a couple of different things. You have the Church of Scotland. These are called the OPRs, the Old Parish Registers. This was the national church. So it was the main church of Protestants in Scotland. You have also a fair amount in the Catholic Church. You'd also have people in Anglican churches. In 1843, there was a separation in the Church of Scotland, and the Free Church was born. The Free Church of Scotland was born, and so there's some things there that you are going to see that later in records are going to be a little different. So I'm going to look for Baxter, and he's male, and I'm going to look here you have your different search options. So this is really good. Lets you do wildcards, names that begin with or phonetic matching. This is really good when you're looking at your mix and your max. And I'm going to look for peacock. And I'm not going to put a year. And we're going to see what we can find. See if it finds anything in there. You can narrow down the parish if you know it. So I'm looking for. So I have Catherine Peacock, and this is the one I'm looking for, and James Baxter. You'll see I can view the image. I already have it. This is actually probably one of my favorite records in my family, just because it is, for the age of it, it is really, it's nice and clear. So this is simply their marriage ban. It was done at Newton on November 25th in 1817. Just states James Baxter in this parish and Catherine Bax, the Peacock, in the parish of Dalkeith, gave their names for proclamation in order to marry or over to marriage. So what they basically, this is a record stating that they are their intention to get married. So this is a very nice record. Like I said, it's very clear. This is actually something unusual for a lot of Scottish records. There's actually Scottish websites. There's a Scottish website just dedicated to reading Scottish writing of the 18th and 19th century handwriting. So it's there. It gives you a lot of options. You can download it as a PDF. You can save it. So you sort of see the different things. It's really good. It's the best source of actually seeing the physical records if you want. So I'm just going to show you a few other examples of ones that I have saved on my account. So I have a bunch different here. This is actually when I was doing my video on Sir John A. Macdonald. This is his baptism record. So just to give you a glimpse here and sort of show you what it was. This again is a church record. It's very similar. It goes through there and you can find the names. So Hugh John Macdonald, who's his father, Helen Shaw tells you about them, and their son John Alexander, born on the 10th of January 1815, and it just tells you a little bit about there. Again, Sir John A. I have, if I go back, we have Catherine Peacock, we have Robert Baxter. These parish registers are interesting. Now we have Elizabeth Baxter. This is my great grandmother. She was, and you'll see I have her listed here in a note. Granny Anderson's birth registration. So there was some question of when her actual birth date was. So finding this record was really important. And this has, like I said, a fairly good detail. And it's similar to what you would see at the time, but it gives you all kinds of information there. You can download it. You can enlarge it as a PDF. So it gives her birth date, where she was born, 19 Whitehill Street, that's really hard to read, something Hall in, let me see, what is that? It should, in, let's see. So I mean, it's hard to read. We have Robert Baxter. He was a coal miner. Elizabeth Baxter, and it has her maiden name, Kinnaird, and it has when they were married. So it even has their wedding date here. So they were married on December 31st, 1873. That's not something you necessarily see on a lot of records. And then it gives you a little bit of more information here, and again when it was registered and what their address was and where they were living, and uh, particularly the the parish. Um, so we have that information here. What's really neat. This is my her father's would be his name there. Again, her birth date. So it has all kinds of really big information. Well, the big thing is that you don't see in a lot of other records. You get the actual marriage date of the parents, which is really nice because if you go searching for the marriage record, you can actually find it because you wouldn't believe how many Robert Baxters there were. That I found through searching. So this is a really good resource, and one you'll use a lot when you're looking up Scottish records. One I recommend using, always, like I said, go to Family Search. They have a really good database on Scottish records, and sort of narrow things down. This is a registration of death, just to show you what it looks like. Again, the statutory records do have a lot of information. So I'm just going to scroll down. So we have Robert Baxter. Tells who he was married to. Has the date. Has a bunch of writing that I can't see. Has his father's name, what his occupation was, what his mother's name was, whether they were living or dead, and it has who basically would be the I guess it's called different things in on different records. Basically, somebody that can attest, and the informant who can attest to the, or witness, you might want to call them, to the death, and that this information is correct, to the best of their knowledge. So that's Scotland's People, a great site. And not only can you find the individual records though on these people, there's other types of records that are available. So we're just going to go back here, and you're going to be able to when you're searching for people, you can search all kinds of different things. They have these virtual volumes, which are really neat. You can actually look for cabinet records. You can look for church records. And you can, where's the church records? So you have your people search, place search, maps and places. Yeah, maps and places is really neat. It has lots of old maps that you can find, which is really kind of neat, especially because it does provide you with these addresses. You can find maps from that time a lot of times, and sometimes you can even find architectural drawings of buildings, which is really neat. And they have a great library of old images that they've just gotten from here. So like I said, in virtual volumes, you can find all kinds of things there. You can search by place. You can search civil and criminal records, church court records. So these, if somebody was excommunicated from church, or there was a problem, you'd be able to find it there. So the other really useful site is, there's actually a bunch of different lists. There's one called the Ships List, which is basically it's passenger lists for immigrants to Australia, Canada, United States, and South Africa. I believe New Zealand as well. That's, that can be very helpful. They have a HebridesePeople.com. It's not one I've used. I have on my mother's side, people from the Hebrides area and the Western Isles. It's again a database of immigrants. The Canadian government has there on the Canadian site. You can find a bunch of different things in regards to Scotland. You can find history. You can find how the research and records. A lot of these records again would have to do with immigration. Depending on the years, the records are limited because they didn't actually have great immigration records for a long time. So I was going to show you though this one last one. This is the one that I thought was, I just found out about that. I really thought was kind of neat. And so if you go to the University of Manitoba, in their archives section, they have this Hudson Bay Company archives. Now this is they have a list of biographical sheets. So you can find, if you had an ancestor that worked for the Hudson Bay Company, and since we're talking about Scottish people, I'm just going to choose a Mick. It will give you if you know sort of the time frame, you can verify if it's the right person. But let's look here. We're going to let's go to William McBean, and you'll notice there's two William McBeans. So what they do, they have the time they worked and also a birth record, and we have John McBean here. So we're going to go to William McBean. This gives a real detailed thing. It tells me, in this case, he was actually from Fallowine or Fort Avine, which is on Lake Superior. It gives me all kinds of things, where he was, what he did. Tells me his parents' names, his wife, any children. So this is a storehouse of information. So if you have relatives who worked at the Hudson Bay Company, Scottish or not, there's a lot of information there. So let's look. I'm just going to look down here, and just another one. We're going to look at. Let's see. I'm going to try to get somebody that's a little. So we're going to look at Donald McDonald. You can see there's all kinds of Donald McDonalds. So we're going to look at the Donald McDonald A. So it tells me where he was born, the parish in Scotland, when he started working, and what he did. In this case, it has a brief biography. It doesn't have his parents' names, but it does have his wife's, their marriage date, and it lists their children and their baptismal dates. So these are really, really good records. If you happen to have a family member, it's definitely worth looking up if you have somebody that worked for the Hudson Bay Company, or you suspect may have. So it's a really kind of a neat source there. So that's it for, just 1 second here. So that's it for the sort of the talking specifically about Scottish relatives. So we're going to go and we're going to start our question and answer period. So I'm going to invite you in the chat if you have any specific questions, whether it be in regards to the Scottish genealogy, Scottish ancestors, or just genealogy in general. Now's your time to ask them. And if you have nothing, sit back, have a beer, drink a whiskey, or whatever. If you're watching this in the replay, just comment and just put team replay. That'd be great, just so I have an idea of when you watch this and who's watching. I have a sort of a question of the week is, again, if you, is in regards to Scottish relatives, and it's simply, do you have Scottish ancestry? If you have Scottish ancestry, comment below. Whether you're watching this live or you're watching this on the repeat, put that in. Let me know if you know when they arrived in Canada or the United States or wherever you might be watching this from. Or if you're still in Scotland, and obviously you might have Scottish relatives, just let me know that too. So we're going to finish up then. Here, our happy hour is winding up. And I want to let you know next week I will not be doing the happy hour. We won't be having a live broadcast. We'll be continue the week after. Just next week, I'm going to a funeral. My grandmother, my mother's mother, died. She was 99. She died in April, and we're having a family funeral in Cape Breton next weekend. So I will be away, but I look forward to seeing you the week after.